A widowed rancher thought his wife died years ago until twin girls walked in and called him Daddy. Daniel Hartley woke before sunrise like he did every morning. The ranch was quiet, wrapped in soft gray light, and the air felt cool against his face as he stepped outside. He paused for a moment on the wooden porch, looking across the wide fields that stretched toward the horizon. Years ago, this place had felt alive with laughter and shared dreams. Now it felt peaceful but empty, like a song missing its melody. He poured coffee into an old metal cup and leaned against the railing. The smell of dust and dry grass filled the air. Horses moved slowly near the fence line, their shadows long in the early morning light. Daniel watched them without really thinking. Routine had become his way of living. Wake early, feed the animals, repair what needed fixing, eat simple meals, sleep early, repeat. People in town called him strong, but they did not know that strength was just another word for loneliness. Years ago, Daniel had been different. He used to smile easily, joke with neighbors, and talk about plans for the future. His wife Clara had been the center of that future. She loved the ranch as much as he did. She had filled the house with warmth, flowers on the windowsill, music playing in the evenings, and laughter that made even hard days feel lighter. Then came the storm. It had started like any other rainy night, but the river swelled beyond its banks, turning calm water into a roaring force. Clara had left earlier that evening after a small argument, saying she needed some air and time to think. Daniel remembered the way her truck lights disappeared down the road while thunder rolled in the distance. He never imagined it would be the last time he saw her. The flood hit hard, roads washed out, bridges collapsed. Rescue teams searched for days. Pieces of her truck were found near the river, but Clara herself was never discovered. Eventually, people stopped searching. The town held a small memorial. Everyone told Daniel he needed to accept it. Accepting it had felt impossible, but time pushed him forward whether he wanted it or not. Now, years later, Daniel lived with memories instead of hope. He finished his coffee and headed toward the barn. Work helped keep his mind steady. The horses greeted him with soft snorts, and he ran a hand along one mare's neck before filling the feed buckets. The steady rhythm of chores calmed him. Every movement felt familiar and safe. By midday, the sun burned bright overhead. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead and walked toward the far fence where a section had broken during the last windstorm. He grabbed tools from the back of his truck and began working, focused on tightening wires and replacing posts. The sound of a car engine reached him from the road. He glanced up, expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor passing through. A dusty old sedan slowed near the ranch gate and stopped. Daniel straightened, shading his eyes against the sun. Visitors were rare. The driver's door opened and a woman stepped out. She wore simple clothes and carried a folder. A social worker, he guessed. That alone made him uneasy. Behind her, two young girls climbed out of the back seat. They looked about 8 years old. Identical faces, twin braids. Matching dresses slightly wrinkled from travel. Daniel set his tools down slowly, unsure what to expect. The woman waved politely and walked toward him, the girls following a few steps behind. They held hands tightly, their expressions a mix of nervousness and determination. As they got closer, Daniel felt something strange twist in his chest. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way the girls looked at him, not like strangers meeting someone new, but like people searching for something familiar. "Mr. Hartley?" the woman asked gently. "That's me," he replied, brushing dirt from his hands. "My name is Elaine Carter. I'm a social worker. We need to speak with you about something important." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" Before she answered, one of the girls whispered to the other. Daniel caught only a few words, but he saw their eyes fixed on him. The wind moved softly through the grass, and for a brief moment everything felt strangely still. The girls stepped forward together. "That's him," one of them said quietly. Daniel felt confusion rise. "I'm sorry, have we met before?" The girls exchanged a glance. Then both looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "Daddy," they said at the same time. The word hit him like a sudden storm. Daniel blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. He let out a short, awkward laugh. "I think you've got the wrong person." But the girls did not look uncertain. They looked sure. Elaine cleared her throat gently. "Mr. Hartley, I know this must be surprising. May we talk somewhere private?" Daniel hesitated. Every instinct told him something serious was happening. He nodded slowly and led them toward the house. The walk felt longer than usual. He could feel the girls watching everything, the barn, the fence, the porch, as if trying to memorize it. Inside, the house carried its usual quietness. Dust floated in the sunlight near the windows. Clara's old rocking chair still sat near the fireplace. Daniel noticed one of the girls glance at it with curiosity. "Please sit," he said, pulling out chairs at the kitchen table. The girls sat side by side, their hands still linked. Elaine placed her folder on the table and opened it carefully. "Mr. Hartley," she began, "do you remember a woman named Clara Hartley?" Daniel froze. The name felt like a door opening inside his chest, a door he had kept locked for years. "Yes," he said slowly, "she was my wife." Elaine nodded gently. "There are some things you need to know." Before she continued, one of the girls reached into her small backpack and pulled out a silver object. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward him. Daniel's breath caught. It was a locket. Small and worn, with a tiny scratch along one side. He knew it immediately. He had given it to Clara years ago. His hand trembled as he picked it up. Memories rushed back, laughter under the stars, promises whispered in the quiet of night, dreams of a future they never got to live. "How did you get this?" he asked softly. The girls watched him carefully, as if waiting for something important. "Our mama gave it to us," one said. Daniel felt the room spin slightly. He looked at Elaine, confusion and disbelief filling his eyes. "What is going on?" Elaine took a deep breath. "Mr. Hartley, these girls were told that you are their father." Silence filled the room. Daniel stared at the twins, noticing details he had not allowed himself to see before: the shape of their smiles, the brightness of their eyes, something painfully familiar. "That's not possible," he said quietly, though his voice lacked certainty. The girls did not speak. They simply watched him, hope and fear mixing on their faces. Outside, the wind moved through the fields, carrying dust across the yard. Inside, Daniel felt his carefully controlled world begin to shift, piece by piece, as questions he never imagined started rising. He looked again at the locket resting in his hand, and for the first time in years, a feeling stronger than grief stirred within him. Daniel sat very still at the kitchen table. The silver locket felt heavy in his hand, even though it was small. His heart was beating fast, and his thoughts were running in every direction. The twin girls sat quietly across from him, their eyes moving between his face and the social worker. Elaine Carter spoke gently, as if she understood how fragile the moment was. "Mr. Hartley, I know this is a shock, but please listen carefully. The girls' mother told them your name many times. Before she passed away, she left documents. In those papers, she wrote that you are their biological father." Daniel swallowed. The words felt unreal. "My wife died," he said slowly. "Years ago, there was a flood. Her truck was found near the river. Everyone searched. They never found her." Elaine nodded. "We believe she survived." The room went silent again. Daniel stared at her. "That's not possible." "It is," she replied softly. "She was found miles away from the river, injured and unconscious. She had no identification. She was taken to a small clinic in another county. For a long time, she suffered from memory loss. She could not remember her name clearly. She could not remember where she came from." Daniel felt like the air had been pulled from his lungs. Clara alive? All these years? The twins listened carefully, holding each other's hands tightly. Elaine continued. "An older woman named Margaret Lewis took care of her. Margaret ran a small boarding house. She had no family of her own. When your wife slowly regained her health, she still struggled with her memories. Margaret helped her start a new life. Later, your wife found out she was expecting children." Daniel's eyes widened. "Children?" "Yes," Elaine said. "Twin girls." Daniel looked at the two little faces in front of him. They were watching him with hope, but also fear that he might reject them. He leaned back in his chair, trying to steady himself. "Why didn't she come back? Why didn't she try to contact me?" Elaine opened the folder and slid a few papers toward him. "She did try. When parts of her memory returned, she remembered your name. She wrote letters, but she did not know your exact address anymore. She remembered the ranch and the town, but the letters were sent back. She believed maybe you had moved away, or that you had started a new life." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. The thought of Clara being alive, alone, confused, and trying to reach him made his chest ache. One of the twins spoke softly. "Mama used to sit by the window at night. She would look at the stars and say someone out there loved her once." The other girl added, "She said if we ever found you, we should tell you she never stopped loving you." Daniel's hands trembled. He placed the locket carefully on the table. "Where is she now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elaine lowered her eyes. She passed away last year due to illness. Margaret Lewis passed away shortly after. Before Margaret died, she contacted our office. She gave us all the documents your wife had saved. She wanted to make sure the girls found their father. The twins looked down at the table. It was clear they had already gone through deep sadness for someone so young. Daniel felt a mix of emotions, shock, grief, guilt, and something else he could not yet name. He had spent years believing Clara was gone forever. He had learned to live with that pain. But now he discovered she had lived, struggled, and raised 2 children without him. He stood up suddenly and walked to the window. The ranch outside looked the same as it always had. The barn, the fences, the wide open land, everything unchanged. But his world had changed completely in just a few minutes. "Do you have proof?" he asked quietly, still facing the window. Elaine stood and walked closer, giving him space but also clarity. "We have your wife's medical records from that time. We have her written statement naming you as the father. We also recommend a paternity test to confirm everything officially. It will remove any doubt." Daniel turned slowly. He looked at the twins again. Now that he allowed himself to really see them, the similarities were impossible to ignore. One had Clara's exact smile. The other had the same thoughtful expression Clara used to have when she was worried about something. One of the girls reached into her backpack again and pulled out a small photograph. She walked carefully toward him and held it up. It was a picture of Clara. Older, thinner, but alive. She was holding 2 babies in her arms. Daniel's knees felt weak. He gripped the back of a chair for support. Tears filled his eyes, but he did not wipe them away. "She looks different," he whispered. "She worked very hard," one of the twins said. "She had 2 jobs. She said she had to be strong for us." Daniel sat down slowly again. The weight of those words pressed on him. "I thought she left me," he admitted quietly. "I thought she chose to drive away that night and never come back. I blamed myself for our argument. I blamed the storm. I blamed everything." The twins watched him carefully. They were old enough to understand sadness, but still young enough to believe in hope. Elaine spoke gently. "Mr. Hartley, your wife never stopped thinking about you. She wrote about you often in her journals. She believed that one day the truth would come out." Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve. "Why didn't anyone tell me she was found?" "It was a small clinic," Elaine explained. "Records were incomplete. She was listed under a temporary name because she could not remember her own. There was no clear way to trace her back at that time. By the time she remembered enough details, years had passed." Silence returned, but this time it felt different, less shocking, more thoughtful. One of the twins slowly stood and walked toward the rocking chair near the fireplace. She touched it gently. "Did our mama sit here?" she asked. Daniel nodded slowly. "Every evening." The girl smiled faintly and sat in it, rocking slightly. Her sister stayed at the table, watching Daniel carefully. "Are you really our daddy?" she asked in a small voice. Daniel looked at her. The question held no accusation, only uncertainty. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I promise we will find out." The girl nodded, accepting his answer. Elaine closed the folder softly. "The test can be arranged quickly. Until then, the girls need temporary placement. We thought it was important to speak with you first." Daniel looked around the house, at the empty walls, the quiet corners, the silence he had grown used to. Then he looked at the twins again. They did not feel like strangers anymore. "Can they stay here?" he asked suddenly. Elaine blinked. "You mean temporarily?" "Yes," Daniel said. His voice was steadier now. "If there's even a chance they're mine, I don't want them anywhere else." The twins looked at each other, surprised and hopeful. Elaine studied his face carefully. She seemed to be measuring his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "We can arrange a temporary stay while the test is processed. I will need you to sign some documents." Daniel signed without hesitation. As the afternoon light shifted across the kitchen floor, the reality of the situation slowly settled in. 2 small suitcases were brought inside. The twins stood near the doorway, unsure of where to go. Daniel cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's a spare room upstairs. It used to be empty. We can fix it up." The twins smiled shyly. As he led them up the wooden stairs, he felt something unfamiliar in his chest, not pain, not confusion, but movement. Life entering a place that had been still for too long. When they reached the spare room, sunlight poured through the window. Dust floated in the air. It was plain and simple, but it was warm. "It's not much," Daniel said quietly. "It's perfect," one of the girls replied. That evening, as the sun began to set outside the ranch, Daniel stood in the hallway and listened to the soft sound of the twins talking inside their room. For the first time in years, the house did not feel empty. But as hope slowly entered his heart, questions still remained. Were they truly his daughters? The first morning with the twins in the house felt strange and new for Daniel. He woke before sunrise as usual, but instead of silence, he heard soft footsteps upstairs and quiet whispering between the girls. For a moment he lay still, listening. The sound felt unfamiliar yet comforting. It reminded him of something he had lost long ago, the feeling of a full home. He got out of bed and moved toward the kitchen, starting coffee the way he always did. As the kettle warmed, he paused and looked around. Two small backpacks rested near the wall. A pair of tiny shoes sat by the door. The house already felt different. When the twins came downstairs, they looked shy but curious. One of them carried a small, stuffed animal. The other looked carefully at everything around her, as if trying to understand where she belonged. "Good morning," Daniel said gently. "Good morning," they replied together. The simple exchange made him smile without thinking. He realized quickly that he had no idea how to cook for children. He made pancakes but burned the first batch. The twins tried not to laugh, but their giggles slipped out anyway. Instead of feeling embarrassed, Daniel found himself laughing too. It was the first time he had laughed like that in years. They ate together at the kitchen table, and slowly conversation began to flow. One twin introduced herself as Lily. The other said her name was Rose. Their voices were soft but full of life. "What do you usually do on a ranch?" Lily asked. "Well," Daniel said, thinking, "there's always something to fix or take care of. Animals need feeding. Fences need checking. It's hard work." Rose's eyes lit up. "Can we see the horses?" Daniel hesitated only for a second before nodding. "After breakfast." Outside, the morning sun warmed the fields. The twins walked close to him, sometimes looking around in wonder. When they reached the barn, Daniel showed them how to move slowly so the animals wouldn't feel nervous. The girls watched everything with excitement. One horse gently lowered its head toward them, and they laughed softly. "They like you," Daniel said. "They remind me of Mama," Rose replied without thinking. The words stopped him for a moment. He crouched down near them. "What was she like?" he asked carefully. The twins exchanged a glance as if deciding where to begin. "She was strong," Lily said. "She worked a lot. Sometimes she was tired, but she always smiled for us." Rose added quietly, "She sang when she cooked. Even when there wasn't much food, she made it feel special." Daniel listened carefully. Every detail felt like a small piece of Clara returning to him. He imagined her living somewhere far away, raising two children, carrying memories he had never known about. "She used to look at old photos," Lily continued. "She kept them hidden in a box. Sometimes she would cry, but she said those were happy tears." Daniel swallowed hard. He turned slightly so they would not see his face change too much. As the day went on, he showed them more of the ranch, the open fields, the old oak tree near the pond, and the small garden that had not been cared for in a long time. The girls asked many questions, and Daniel answered each one patiently. He noticed how naturally they walked beside him, as if they trusted him already. That trust both warmed and frightened him. Later, they returned inside to rest. While the twins explored their room, Daniel sat alone at the kitchen table. He looked at the photograph they had shown him earlier, Clara holding two babies. He traced her face gently with his finger. "You survived," he whispered to himself. "You were out there all this time." Guilt crept into his thoughts. He wondered if he could have searched harder, looked beyond what people told him, but he pushed those thoughts away. The past could not be changed. Only the future could. That afternoon, Elaine called to update him. The paternity test had been processed quickly, and results would come soon. Daniel felt nervous after ending the call. Even though something deep inside him already believed the truth, he still waited for confirmation. The twins sat on the floor nearby, drawing pictures with crayons. One drawing showed a small house, a son, and three people holding hands. "Is that us?" Daniel asked gently. Rose nodded. "If you want." He smiled softly but felt his chest tighten with emotion. In the evening, they cooked together. The girls insisted on helping. Flour covered the counter and laughter filled the kitchen again. Daniel realized he had almost forgotten how much life could exist in simple moments. After dinner, they sat in the living room. The twins told more stories about their mother, how she worked at a cafe, how she read bedtime stories even when she was tired, how she sometimes stared at the horizon as if searching for something. She used to say someone important was missing, Lily said quietly. Daniel looked down at his hands. She never said your name at first, Rose added. But later she did. She said you were kind and brave. The words felt heavy but also healing. Just as they finished talking, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was Elaine again. He stepped into the hallway to answer. Mr. Hartley, she said gently, we have the results. His heart raced. They confirm that you are the biological father. Daniel closed his eyes. A long breath escaped him. The truth settled into him slowly but firmly. Thank you, he said quietly. When he returned to the living room, the twins looked at him with hopeful eyes. Well, Lily asked. Daniel knelt down in front of them. For a moment he did not know what words to use. It's true, he said softly. I am your father. The girls stared at him and then both smiled at the same time. Without hesitation, they hugged him tightly. Daniel froze at first, surprised by the sudden closeness. Then he wrapped his arms around them gently. The feeling was overwhelming, warm, real, and deeply emotional. For the first time since losing Clara, he did not feel alone. Later that night, after tucking them into bed, Daniel walked outside onto the porch. The sky was filled with stars. He leaned against the railing and looked toward the horizon. I found them, he whispered into the quiet night. Our girls. The wind moved softly through the fields, carrying a sense of peace. But as hope grew, new challenges waited ahead. The town would have questions. Life would change completely. He would need to learn how to be a father to two children who had grown without him. Still, for the first time in years, Daniel felt ready. Behind him, the house glowed with warm light, filled with voices and laughter instead of silence. Life on the ranch changed faster than Daniel expected. The house that had once echoed with silence now carried the sound of footsteps running across wooden floors, soft laughter from upstairs, and questions that never seemed to end. At first, the change felt overwhelming. Daniel had spent years living alone, answering only to himself. Now every decision mattered to two small hearts watching him closely. The morning routine shifted completely. Instead of quiet coffee on the porch, Daniel now made 3 plates for breakfast. He learned quickly that Lily liked extra syrup on her pancakes, while Rose preferred fruit. He burned fewer pancakes now. The girls often teased him gently when he tried new recipes. Their laughter filled the kitchen, and even when he made small mistakes, he no longer felt embarrassed. He felt alive. Helping them get ready for school was another new challenge. Daniel struggled with braiding hair. The first time he tried, the braids were uneven and loose. Lily looked at herself in the mirror and tried not to smile too much. It's okay, she said kindly. You're still learning. Rose added, Mama said practice makes things better. Daniel nodded seriously, as if it were a lesson he needed to remember more than they did. The next morning he tried again. Slowly, carefully, his hands became steadier. The town noticed the change immediately. Word spread quickly that Daniel Hartley had twin daughters. Some neighbors stopped by with friendly smiles and small gifts. Others watched from a distance, whispering questions. Daniel had lived quietly for so long that sudden attention made him uneasy. One afternoon, while picking up supplies at the general store, he felt eyes on him. Lily and Rose stood close beside him, holding his hands. A few townspeople stared openly. Are those Clara's girls? Someone whispered. Daniel felt tension rise inside him. He turned calmly and faced the crowd. Yes, he said firmly. They are my daughters. His voice carried strength, not anger. The twins squeezed his hands gently, sensing his protective tone. That moment marked something important. Daniel was no longer just a lonely rancher. He was a father standing for his family. Back at the ranch, life continued to adjust. The girls started school, and Daniel found himself sitting in small chairs during parent meetings, listening carefully to teachers. He asked questions about homework and reading levels. At night, he helped them practice spelling words at the kitchen table. Sometimes he felt unsure. He worried he was not doing enough. He worried about the years he had missed. But each time doubt crept in, the twins reminded him of something simple. You're here now, Rose once said quietly when he apologized for not knowing how to help with a math problem. Yes, Lily added, that's what matters. The ranch itself began to feel different. Daniel decided to repaint the spare room properly. Together, they chose a soft yellow color. The twins helped carefully, though more paint ended up on their clothes than on the walls. They laughed when Daniel pretended to be upset about the mess. He fixed the old swing under the oak tree and added 2 small seats instead of one. In the evenings, the twins swung side by side while Daniel watched from the porch. Sometimes he joined them, pushing gently and listening to their stories about school friends and new discoveries. But not every moment was easy. One night after a long day, Lily asked a question that stopped Daniel in his tracks. "Why didn't you come find us?" The question held no anger, only confusion. Daniel sat down slowly in the living room. The girls looked at him with serious eyes. "I thought your mother was gone forever," he explained gently. "I searched for her, I prayed, I hoped, but when everyone told me she didn't survive the flood, I believed them. I never knew you existed." The twins listened carefully. Rose spoke softly. "Mama said sometimes grown-ups make mistakes because they don't know the whole story." Daniel felt tears fill his eyes. She was right. They moved closer to him on the couch. In that quiet moment, understanding replaced doubt. They were no longer strangers trying to connect. They were a family learning each other's truth. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. While cleaning the attic, Daniel found an old wooden box that had belonged to Clara. Dust covered the lid. He carried it downstairs carefully and opened it at the kitchen table while the twins watched. Inside were old letters, photographs, and small keepsakes. One envelope caught his attention. It had his name written on it in Clara's handwriting. His hands trembled as he opened it. The letter was dated years ago, shortly after the flood. Clara had written about her confusion, her slow return of memory, and her hope that one day she would find her way back home. She wrote about the twins growing inside her and her fear of not being able to reach him. The final line read, "If life gives us another chance, I hope our family will stand together under the same sky again." Daniel's voice broke as he read it aloud. The twins listened quietly, holding onto every word. "She never stopped believing," Lily whispered. "No," Daniel agreed. "She didn't." The letter became something sacred in the house. Daniel placed it in a frame and set it near Clara's photograph in the living room. It was not just a memory of sadness anymore. It was proof of love that had survived time and distance. As months passed, the ranch felt whole again. Daniel planted new flowers in the garden, something he had not done since Clara disappeared. The twins helped dig small holes and water the soil carefully. "This is for Mama," Rose said as she pressed a seed into the ground. "And for us," Lily added. Daniel smiled softly. The garden began to bloom slowly, just like their new life together. The town's whispers faded over time. People saw Daniel walking proudly with his daughters. They saw the twins riding horses under his careful guidance. They saw a family rebuilding something strong. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the 3 of them sat on the porch together. The sky turned shades of orange and pink. The twins leaned against him, one on each side. "Do you think Mama can see us?" Lily asked. Daniel looked up at the wide sky. "I believe she can," he said gently, "and I believe she's proud of you both." The twins smiled, comforted by his words. For Daniel, the pain of the past no longer felt like a heavy chain. It felt like a lesson that had led him back to something he never expected to find again. The ranch was no longer just land and fences. It was laughter in the kitchen, bedtime stories in small voices, and hope growing in a once-empty heart. Spring arrived gently on the ranch, bringing soft green grass and warmer mornings. The cold air of winter faded and the fields began to bloom again. For Daniel, the change in season felt like a reflection of his own life. Months earlier, he had been standing alone on that same porch, believing his story had already ended. Now, every sunrise carried new energy. The twins had settled into their new life completely. Lily and Rose moved through the house like they had always belonged there. Their drawings covered the refrigerator door. Their small boots rested by the entrance. The spare room upstairs was no longer plain. It was filled with bright blankets, books, and quiet whispers before bedtime. Daniel adjusted to fatherhood step by step. He learned how to pack school lunches without forgetting napkins. He remembered school event dates by writing them on a large calendar hanging in the kitchen. He even learned how to fix a torn dress with simple stitches after watching an online video late one night. Some evenings were tiring. After long hours working on the ranch, Daniel would feel the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. But then one of the girls would run up to him, holding a drawing or telling him about something new they learned at school, and his exhaustion would soften. One afternoon, the twins came home with exciting news. Their school was hosting a small talent evening for families. Students could sing, recite poems, or perform something special. Lily and Rose wanted to sing a song together. "Will you come?" Rose asked with hopeful eyes. Daniel smiled. "Of course I'll come." They practiced every evening in the living room. Their voices were not perfect, but they were full of heart. Daniel would sit quietly on the couch, listening as they repeated the same lines again and again. Sometimes they stopped and argued gently about who sang louder, then burst into laughter. The night of the event arrived. The school gymnasium was decorated with simple paper stars hanging from the ceiling. Parents filled the seats, talking quietly as children prepared backstage. Daniel sat in the front row. He felt nervous, as if he were the one about to perform. When Lily and Rose walked onto the stage, holding hands, he felt his heart swell with pride. They looked small under the bright lights, but they stood tall. Before they began singing, Lily stepped forward slightly. "This song is for our mama," she said softly, "and for our daddy." Daniel felt tears fill his eyes. The twins began to sing. Their voices blended gently, carrying emotion more than perfection. The song spoke about finding home and standing together even after long journeys. Each word felt personal, like it was written just for their family. As they finished, the room filled with applause. Daniel stood immediately, clapping proudly. The twins searched the crowd until they found him. When their eyes met his, they smiled widely. After the event, they ran into his arms. He hugged them tightly, not caring who was watching. "You were amazing," he whispered. "It felt good," Rose said. "It felt right," Lily added. On the drive home, the sky was clear and filled with stars. The twins talked excitedly about their performance. Daniel listened quietly, grateful for every word. Later that night, after tucking them into bed, he stayed by their doorway a little longer than usual. The soft sound of their breathing filled the room. He realized how much he had changed since the day they first walked into his life. The next morning, Daniel decided to take them somewhere special. He led them to the garden they had planted months earlier. The flowers were blooming beautifully now, soft pinks, bright yellows, and gentle whites. "This is for Mama," Rose said again, smiling. Daniel nodded. "Yes, and for the life we're building." He knelt down and gently placed a small wooden sign near the flowers. It read, "Clara's Garden." The twins helped water the plants carefully. Sunlight touched their faces and laughter carried through the air. Over time, the town fully accepted the truth. Neighbors stopped whispering and started offering help. Some even shared old stories about Clara that Daniel had not heard before. Slowly, her memory shifted from something painful to something comforting. Daniel found peace in simple moments, watching the twins ride small horses under his careful guidance, helping them with school projects at the kitchen table, listening to bedtime questions about stars and dreams. One evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel sat on the porch while Lily and Rose played near the oak tree. The sky turned golden, then orange. The wind moved gently across the fields. "Daddy," Lily called out suddenly. "Yes," he answered. "Are you happy?" she asked. The question surprised him. He thought for a moment, looking at the wide land, the glowing sky, and the two girls who had brought life back into his home. "Yes," he said honestly, "I am." Rose ran over and sat beside him. "Mama always said happiness sometimes comes late, but it always finds the right place." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. "She was very wise," he replied softly. As darkness slowly covered the ranch, Daniel understood something clearly. He could not change the years that were lost. He could not undo the confusion or the distance that kept them apart. But he could choose what happened next. He chose to be present, to protect, to guide, to love. The ranch was no longer just land and memories. It was a home filled with second chances. It was proof that life sometimes returns what was once believed to be gone forever. That night, after the twins went to sleep, Daniel stood alone under the stars one last time. He looked up at the sky and spoke quietly. "We're okay now," he said. The wind moved softly, almost like an answer. Inside the house, warm light shone through the windows. Laughter still echoed faintly from earlier in the evening. The quiet that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. Daniel turned and walked back inside, closing the door gently behind him. Sometimes the past does not disappear.